You ever had a girl want to kiss you and you like no, and they kind of insist?
Go further. It's more like I was manipulated, he was abusive, and I was assaulted. There was a girl I was obsessed with for years. And we're talking like the depressing, like pathetic obsession. We're talking to like fall asleep on the phone, like that kind of shit, because we didn't have text messaging or stuff. Oh yeah, real bad. And I finally tried to ask this girl out, like just coming into like, it was between like sophomore, junior,
Feels weird just talking to a voice when I'm on camera, but literally I'm gonna just minimize my camera so I don't have to see myself. There you go.
Well, man, if you're gonna guilt trip me, I could probably figure it out. Hold
on. Oh no, that's fine. I don't mind. It's cool. It's not an issue at all. It's just different. I've never done these kind of calls. Actually, it's kind of weird being set up with like a mic and everything. Actually, no, it's a regular Discord call. What am I talking about? I think I'm just being nervous for no reason. So you're fine.
Well, how's it going? How you doing?
Am I loud? Let me lower the volume. Let me just make sure.
No, you're good. You're perfect, I think.
All right. Okay, cool. I don't have the high end setup you guys got with good cameras and filters and shit like that. So.
Wait, well, what kind of camera are you using right now?
No, I got a good camera because you record YouTube. I'm talking about more so like the audio equipment and like just getting everything in sync. But I'm using a DSLR, so.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, there you go. You got some kind of camera. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. First things first. If you're ever gonna react to our videos again, you probably want to not steal our takes before you react to the video.
All right. Well, unless you're going to accuse me of having a DeLorean and going back in time. All right. My takes came out 100% before yours. So, but nice try. Okay.
Hey, man. I was watching the video and I couldn't stop laughing at the chat who were accusing you of that. You get accused of that a lot?
I think generally it's just joking because we have like... If you know how internet humor goes, there's like all these jokes are like 10 layers deep. Like some people accuse me of stealing takes. Some people actually steal my takes. Or some people make jokes about me stealing other people's takes that are stealing my takes. And then some people like there's like a whole layer of like dumb shit. Yeah.
I've definitely been guilty of stealing someone's take before.
Oh well, I mean, it's not technically bad. I mean, if you hear somebody that has a better take than you on something, you probably should steal it, right?
Yeah. I mean, ideas are meant to be shared, right? Not to be hoarded.
Exactly.
I think it's kind of shallow sometimes when you just hear something, you repeat it verbatim without trying to actually analyze it. But yeah, there are definitely times where I heard an idea that was definitely superior to mine. And I just like thought about it. I was like, oh, you know what? After looking at the information surrounding the idea, I'm like, this is probably the better take.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah. But first thing, before I even get into the topics, man, I was watching the Arcadum video yesterday, and I had a question. Is it normal to just record Discord calls? Is that like a normal thing?
You know... Depends. I would say it's not normal, but I would say I don't think anybody in this industry is normal. I think you should record everything. That's really? My policy. Hell yeah. If I'm having calls that I know are really important, I got a lot of recordings saved. But I've also had people try to burn me really bad publicly that I've come back and like I've been able to like completely destroy their entire career because they tried some dumb shit. But that's only because I had a bunch of recordings, and if I didn't have recordings, I would have been fucked. So I think recording stuff is important. Not to like blackmail people, but just it's like to protect yourself, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would definitely understand if it was like a call with somebody who may like be accusing you of something or anything like that. But like at least from the calls that I heard, it just sounded like the dude was a bit like manipulative in his friendship. I don't know if there's any like sexual connotation to their whole thing, but it sounds like he was being a douche to the lady, and then afterwards, when called on it, he doubled down. So I didn't know why she would have recorded that, but maybe I'm lost. I
think the problem was he was being like a mega manipulator to like tons of different women, and I think he was flexing his position as a community leader in order to do it. So for instance, when he started to get like rejected by a couple women, he worked for this show called Callous Row, if you've ever heard of that. Yeah. And he would like get them like removed from the show and stuff. And then he was also running these huge D&D campaigns. He gets like he's like a 10,000 view streamer. So people felt like kind of weird because they didn't want to get like removed from his community completely and everything. So it was kind of fucky in terms of how that all went. Yeah.
Okay. So I think then I kind of get it out. I get the idea a little bit more. I didn't understand maybe I guess the greater context of why anybody would record that call, because like obviously I've had friends before in the past where I'm like, why am I friends with this person? But yeah, I think that kind of changed the circumstance. So that makes more sense.
Yeah. And
okay. Yeah. Sorry, you were gonna say?
Yeah, basically, yeah. By the time she was recording it, it was because all these girls had gotten together and had realized that he was playing like all these crazy games behind the scenes, and that's why she went into that call recording it. She wasn't just like automatically recording all their calls. She had already figured out at that point that he was up to some like really weird shit. Yeah.
All right, that makes a lot more sense. I was really confused. I'm like, why am I hearing this bad friendship conversation? Like,
Yeah,
this is
sure.
very awkward. But yeah, there's just certain conversations where you're like, why is this public? Yeah, you ever have that instance where you're reading somebody's like twit longer, and I'm like, this is not worthy of being recorded in any type of way, or this shouldn't be a public thing. Do you ever have those instances?
Yeah, for sure. There are some of them where, yeah. But I mean, that's kind of how you spot fakes on like the internet too, where like there'll be like some funny thing happening at a restaurant, but like the camera's like perfectly framing some guy for no reason, and it catches all the action before anything's even happened. It's like, wait, why are you even recording, right? And it's like, yeah.
Right, and also the weird part about private conversation is there's a certain level of comfort and intimacy and rapport that you may have built with somebody, which makes the lingo and the things that you guys say make sense within that greater context. But when you're just watching a recorded conversation completely without any of that shared history between you and that person, then it sounds weird. If you didn't know that a couple was a couple and they're just having this conversation, they're using certain lingo, you might be like, oh, that's kind of creepy. Why are they talking like that to each other?
Yeah,
But
I say this a lot. This is why when like some of
yeah.
these things get leaked, I want to see a lot. This is kind of why I was happy with the Arcadum stuff. I got lots of stuff to read so I could get a feel for the behavior. Because when somebody's showing me like one page, it's like, as an example, there was like an allegation that was dropped like 2 weeks ago, and there was like just like 1 or 2 pages of logs leaked, and like one guy would say something flirty, and the girl would be like, "Die, I'm going to sleep." Like she'd say stuff like that, and if you just read it like just like that, like you can look at it and be like, "Oh my god, this is horrible. She's literally telling him to die." But like also that could just be like kind of a flirty, playful thing somebody says. It's really hard to tell by just reading, If you were to take just one page out of my DMs with a lot of different people, I might look like I'm being like a huge asshole piece of shit. But it's just like the way that we kind of like banter with each other, Or it depends.
Yeah, which I think is a greater problem because I do not believe that people take into consideration that greater context when they're reading a lot of this stuff, and as a result, they kind of take things in a vacuum and be like, "Well, look, receipts," but those receipts don't tell the whole story. I remember I had this weird reaction when I think I read like the Fedmeister Pokey stuff, and I was reading the DMs. And I'm like, "Oh, this is so fucking cringe. Why am I reading awkward messages between two individuals?"
Yeah.
But you don't have the greater context, and people selectively edit what's going to oftentimes make them look good. It's very rare that people put incriminating evidence of themselves that showcases their own culpability in situations. So I immediately, as soon as I start seeing private messages or private conversations, I start to kind of recoil a little bit because I'm like, I don't know the full context of your guys' dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And that's also something I say too. Whenever you're looking at an accusation, if the accusation comes out and the accusation is like pretty, I always tell people like, you got to consider that whatever they're posting is obviously painting them in the best light and making the other person look as bad as possible. So if their accusation is already starting off like kind of weak, it's probably not the most credible or the best type of thing going forward, right? Because they're leading with their best evidence and they're trying to present things as favorably as possible. And if it already looks like flimsy, then yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, there was actually an incident of that. A girl reported her own story of like sexual assault. This happened in my city of Montreal. She was this comedian. She was dating this other comedian. They were both obese, and I guess they were dating for like 5 months. This is her words, and they were dating for like 5 months, and 5 months in, apparently they never had sex. So the guy starts to get a little bit nervous because he's like, "Is there something wrong with me? Like we're 26, we've never had sex, we've been dating for 5 months." And one time while they're in bed, according to her words, he relates to her that he's feeling insecure because he thinks like maybe it's because of his weight that she doesn't want to fuck him, right? So they're having this conversations back and forth, and she doesn't exactly explain how, but all she says is like, he explained to me that he was feeling unattractive and I may have felt bad, but I didn't relay that to him, and we ended up having sex. And then a week later she like blasts his name on social media. It's like, he assaulted me. And I was just like, whoa, isn't it possible that somebody was just deeply insecure? And this was coming from her side. So that's why I was like, okay, if this is your story, I got some questions. But immediately everybody jumped all over it. And I was just like, damn, a man can't even have insecurities. Like, it's possible. Maybe he leveraged his insecurities to get sex. I don't really know. But it's one of those things where if you're not present, you don't really have any way of knowing. And based off her story, you couldn't tell. So it was very confusing for me to read.
Yeah, this is something that I talk about a lot, is that like, it seems like nobody has a bad experience anymore. It's either you had a good experience or you were fucking raped. There is like no more, you can never have like, it's unfathomable that maybe you met somebody and like the vibes were shit and you fucked and it kind of sucked or whatever. And you can never come away and be like, that's kind of a bad experience. You know, it just wasn't good. It's more like I was manipulated, he was abusive, and I was assaulted. Like there is no just like bad experience, which is annoying to me because all of the conversations around sex and dating are basically completely revolve around here is how not to rape, and that's the only thing that they talk about, and then they move on from it, right? As long as you're not raping, you're fine. And it's like, okay.
Oh, okay, we're about to get spicy with it then. That's a great segue. But before I get to that, on the topic of like manipulation, there's always another interesting aspect where negative emotions within any kind of relationship are always going to be remembered a lot easier than positive ones, and so people remembering their past experiences, their past relationships will tend to highlight the negative aspects of it. So I'm sure you had this happen. You ever date? You disagree?
I think that super depends on your state of mind at the time.
Okay, go on.
I would have to think more about this. The only reason why I say I know that isn't necessarily the case is a really common, I don't know if you'd call this like a trope, is that two people in a really shitty relationship where they know it's bad, as soon as they break up, when they try to remember the relationship, all they look at it with like rose-tinted glasses and like, maybe we can try again, blah, blah, blah. They get back together. It's fucking horrible. They break up and they have to do this weird like back and forth thing where they get together and break up like 400 times before they finally like break up or, you know, somebody kills each other. Yeah. I know that happens sometimes. But also I do know sometimes people look back and for whatever reason, like if you get out of a relationship, sometimes people's way of coping with that, because people aren't capable of thinking like maybe I made mistakes or maybe we both really like each other, but we're just not compatible. Instead, the way that you cope is like, that person was horrible. They were always horrible. I remember every bad thing. Fuck them. So I can see it going like either way.
I definitely agree it can go both ways. But the problem is like the consequences for it going the other way are definitely far more negative than obviously only seeing the bright side. And it's very rare that we have a balanced view, that we see both the good and the bad.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, I mean, I say that maybe a lot of my exes just probably, if they had a balance view, have nothing to say. But it's always interesting when you stop seeing somebody and then months later you have a conversation like, yeah, you know, it turns out you were very manipulative. I'm like, okay, let me think about this a little bit. And you look at chat logs and stuff like that, and it doesn't reflect. But one thing I had to when I was reading up on like witness testimonies and things like that is a lot of times people's recollections of things aren't considered very viable because of the fact that people's memories are altered. I've done this to my own memories, like with like bad events that happened in my life where I've heightened certain details that weren't there, or I've added in things. And once I was kind of confronted with that, I was like, oh shit, why did I do that? It's kind of part of the natural human experience.
Yeah, my favorite example of that is sometimes if you ever revisit old chat logs where you were upset, or actually, I've even done this with old debates that I've had, where I'll go back and I'll listen to myself, and I'm like, I'm pretty heated in the debate, and I'm like, you know, I'm mad, but I'm pretty right. And then someone will say something, and then I'll go off, and I'll be like, wait, oh my God, I totally did not understand what that guy just said. I'm like not connecting, and it's so obvious. What am I doing? Or you can go back and you can read DMs, and it's like, I got really mad because this girl fucking triggered the fuck out of me. But then when you go back and you read the DMs, it's like, no, I don't actually think she meant it that way at all. I think I was just really triggered for no reason. Like, fuck, I got really mad for really dumb reasons. That happens all the time, and it's really frustrating. I'll go back and I'll reread some stuff and be like, I was just way off base here. Like, I just wasn't thinking correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that adds to the set of problems that comes from old events and then trying to remember them. Is one person remembers it the other way, the other one remembers it. Sometimes it's not even insidious. That's the weird aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's people's memories are naturally built to defend them and their ego, and as a result it kind of modifies things due to all kinds of things happening within the brain itself. But you have two individuals who feel negatively about the other one, saying the other one did this or did that to them, and the reality is both of them could be wrong about how things actually went down. And I remember just reading like message logs between me and somebody else who felt I was pushing, and I'm like, poo-poo, you were always making the sexual innuendo, like it's right here in the log. So it was kind of a weird moment, but then maybe I in voice calls was doing it differently. I can't remember all the details, but it's crazy when somebody comes at that comes with something that happened so long ago and feels so differently about it. It's like, well, your last messages to me were all extremely positive. What, are you so afraid of me that you didn't feel comfortable saying so? So it's never a good feeling when you had what you perceived as a good experience with somebody, and then they also relate that they were very wonderful, and then you get blindsided 4 or 5 months later, you know?
That's something I try to do when I read through some of these logs. I try to look at it from both ends, and something that really commonly happens is if you're looking at this, and if you're reasonably experienced with conversations, we'll say with like people of the opposite sex, I'll be reading a chat log, and in the last case, it's really obvious that the woman is dropping pretty big "I'm not interested" hints. Like if you were paying attention and you knew what to look for, you'd be like, okay, this woman is not engaging at all. She's not interested. But if you know that the guy isn't as socially experienced, and he's not, you can also see, based on the woman not directly saying no, that the guy probably feels like there's just enough string out there for him to grab onto, and there's always just enough to pull him back in. And I try to talk about this sometimes. Like, so there were like a couple of flirty messages where like maybe, so here's like, I'll make this up as an example. A guy might say like, so I am looking for somebody to date right now. Like, are you single? And the girl might say something like, well, I'm not dating anybody. I'm not available right now, maybe in the future. So she'll say some shit like that, thinking like, okay, like I've pushed him off, but all the guy sees is like, maybe in the future. That's my fucking in. I gotta work to convince her, right? So like, even though like if you look at it from like a neutral perspective, or if you were more aware, you'd be like, okay, she's not interested. If she was, she would have been more forward. You can see from the guy's perspective, like, oh fuck, he sees that like little thread of hope, and he's gonna all in on that chance until like, yeah, shit gets weird. Yeah.
I agree. There's definitely a social ineptitude. There's the other end of the spectrum as well, where you've had this happen, where women don't tell you the answer. They want to lead you to it. And so they kind of want you.
I will, yeah, actually, let me go back and amend what I'm saying. I will say that there's social ineptitude on both ends. People make fun of guys for being super, autistic or whatever all the time, but that's because generally in dating environments, guys are the ones that are always have to make the move. So, and this is going to sound really victim blame. I don't mean to make it sound that way, but women do a lot of shit where they are non-confrontational, but the non-confrontational stuff can very easily be confused as an invitation for further flirting. Because like the way that messaging goes, that is really, really, really nuanced, and a lot of people just won't pick up on that. And there are a lot of like unfortunate situations that end up with a guy pushing too hard online, where the girl could have literally said like, "Hey, I'm not interested," and then it probably would have ended. But it was more just like, not right now. Like, well, maybe later. Maybe in the future. I'm just not in the mood right now. Like when you say stuff like that, like the other person like is feeling like there's something there, and they'll keep pushing. And it's like, come on, do you not see what you're doing? Like, what the fuck? Like, I would look like, it's so funny because like sometimes every now and then like a girl will message me and be like, hey, like I don't know what to say to this guy. Like, how do I handle this? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's like, I'm totally not interested at all. And I'll be like, okay. And she'll send me logs. And she'll be like responding to every message that he sends, like sometimes with more questions and everything. And I'm like, bro, like you are autistic. Like, what are you talking? Like this guy like feels like you're super engaged. Like I think you're engaged in this conversation. Like what the fuck is wrong with you? But I think it's funny that guys get all the blame for
responsibility.
Being like, totally socially unaware. But there are so many girls that are so unaware of like the impact that they're having in a conversation and everything. Yeah.
So I'll go 2 points on that. First one, I've had so many experiences. This happened to me not even long ago. This happened to me a few months back. But I had a girl sleeping over, and we both got into the bed, and she didn't want to have sex, from what I could gather. So I was like, cool. So she says good night. She kisses me on the cheek. I turn over. I go to sleep. And the next morning, I get an earful, and I was like, what happened? And she says, because I basically invited her to come closer, but she wanted to sleep on her side of the bed. She was tired. She hadn't slept in 24 hours from the night before due to some activity she was up to. So I was like, cool. So come morning, she's like, yeah, when I turned around, I was like just waiting for you to invite me back in because I didn't feel. I was like, oh, hell no. You're not going to tell me no to something and then expect me to double down on something or insist and then get upset because I didn't. Like, you got to use your grown woman mouth and communicate these things. But there is a real aspect of the whole chase where for some people, and this is not like some abnormality in like rare people, for some people, the idea of being desired and a little bit of insistence is endearing. And it sends the most confusing messages because what works for her doesn't work for the next person. And I've had this happen to me numerous times where I can tell they want to lead me to the water without telling me what they actually want. Mm-hmm. And that makes for such easy forms of miscommunication. So what seems obvious in their heads is not nearly as obvious in your head a lot of the times.
For sure.
And the second thing I was going to say, this comes down to like what I think is a bigger problem within this whole conversation surrounding harassment, conversations between people, is that as adults, we're not socialized to really learn how. I feel like people are very comfortable having sex. They're not comfortable talking about it. Mm-hmm. Okay. and they're not comfortable talking about flirting. They're not talking about educating people about flirting. And so we just throw a lot of people with like high hormonal levels in this kind of way, expecting them to understand how to navigate it when everybody's different and everybody moves a little bit differently. And as a result, there's so much miscommunication. There's an inability to communicate your desires, what you're comfortable. Some people don't even know what they're comfortable with. You know, some people have no idea what they like and what they don't like and what they're okay with. So it's just a mess. It's a hot mess, and nobody acknowledges the lack of education that goes into this whole realm. I've never even people really heard about seduction education. Well, a conversation that happens.
It's actually even worse than that. It's not that nobody's talking about it. It's that there's only one group of people talking about it, and it's only like the red pill pickup artist people, because nobody like on the left will have any of those conversations. Basically, all of the conversations are, here is your 4-step guide to make sure that you're not raping anybody, and good job. Good luck. As long as you're not raping, you're good. And that's it. That's all the people ever talk about for anything. And it's like, okay, whatever. Yeah, and it's really, really, really dumb. The bar is like very low in terms of like what people like left-leaning socially seem to want to talk about when it comes to those types of interactions. So then you automatically cede all of the ground to like the more right-leaning socially people, which are in like the red pill and the pickup artist communities or whatever, basically.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of conversation about coercion and pressure within relationships, but I'm like, relationships revolve around pressure and compromise and things like that. And a lot of it is more commonplace on a small level that never. How about, you ever had a girl want to kiss you and you like no, and they kind of insist?
Go further. Go further. Like, I'll see people make posts on like the relationship subreddit, like, you know, I didn't really want to fuck my husband last night. I was kind of tired. Or I didn't want to fuck my wife, but he really wanted to. And it's like, should I do it? And people are like, that's fucking rape. Don't ever give it. And it's like, dude, there are plenty of times where like my significant other's like, hey, I'm really horny. And you know, like, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not tired, but I can fucking get you off, or we can fuck. Like, it's fine. It's not the end of the fucking world. Like, yeah, sometimes you like.
That doesn't sound like enthusiastic consent.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, dude, relationships are totally about compromise sometimes. Like, it's okay. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, not every single scenario when you have sex and you aren't 100% feeling it is you're being fucking raped. Like, Jesus. Like, yeah, people get so fucking extreme on things. It's like, God damn.
Yeah, and then the reason why I brought up the kissing example is it seems so small, but it kind of sows the seeds for how pressure and insistence is kind of omnipresent in these dynamics anyways. People ask repeatedly for forms of affection and different things all the time. And I remember I was sitting across from a girl and she wanted to kiss. And I'm like, she had like chapstick on, like other stuff. I was like, nah, I don't want to. And she kept insisting. And not that it bothered me. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, this is unacceptable. But I just sat back and thought about it for a second. I'm like, isn't this how we lay down the groundwork for how we engage in intimacy in general? Like, people learn from their experiences. They don't learn from some online source, generally speaking. The most impactful things they're going to learn from are the people that they interact
experience
with. And so if we make this commonplace on smaller levels, whether it be affection, whether it be take me here, all this stuff, there's so much pressure that's involved in all these dynamics. And I was even succumbed to this. I've been on the receiving end and I've also been on the giving end. I'm not going to sit here and act sanctimonious. There's definitely been times where I've pushed for certain things, and I never thought it strange because it was part of pretty much all my relationship experiences. Like, the amount of times that girls insisted on affection or cuddling or just touching in general, it's like, it happens all the time. So that's why I'm always confused when I see this online dialogue or these Twitter takes, because it's so disconnected from people's intimacy reality.
Or more like, people aren't capable of engaging past like level 0 understandings. For instance, like, people say like, you need to be careful for power dynamics. Like, okay, sure. But every single relationship, unless you are literally engaging in a consensual sexual relationship with like a twin fucking sibling, every relationship is going to have some type of power dynamic. There's going to be a difference, you know? And if you want to get like really edgy with it, like, people will always talk about like the power dynamics that men have over women, but nobody will address the sexual power dynamics that women can have over men. You know, when you've got a man that's willing to fucking destroy his entire fucking life, his family, his job, and everything for some pussy, that's a pretty big power differential. Like, that woman is leveraging a lot of fucking power over that guy that he's willing to do some crazy fucking shit to fuck her. Not to say again that any power dynamics are not necessarily bad. They're just things that you should be aware of. Like, that's it. You know, and they could be problematic, but not always. They're not always a bad thing. You know.
Yeah, but no, that would require people to actually think beyond the first layer and see, like, all right, well, what's going on here? It's kind of like someone sent me that Trisha Paytas take where she's like, well, Keem was fucking a 21-year-old. I don't care. I just don't care. If he wants to fuck a 21-year-old and 21 wants to fuck him, is he her boss? No. Is she a fan? Cool. Unless he's leveraging stuff like, hey, I'll give you a free T-shirt signed by me if we fuck. Unless he's saying weird shit like that, I don't give a fuck what two consenting adults do. But now you're having this whole new mantra where it's like, well, the brain's not fully developed till 25.
Till 25? Yeah, so what? So
I'm just like, well, this is so, and this is my problem with these conversations, and I was going to bring this up later, but age of consent only seems to matter when it comes to sex. This is how awkward our North American relationship is with sex. Is they only give a fuck about whether or not you're mature enough once it's about sex. They don't care if you join the army. They don't care if you buy a house, take student debt. They don't care if you do drive cars. You're mature enough. Moment you want to fuck somebody and you're 21 and they're 40, it's creepy. I can't get behind it. It's just so awkward. And I don't understand the genesis of this kind of babying of adults.
Well, the reason why is because people don't actually understand why, like, relationships with like children are bad. Like, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but there was a guy who was like, his name was Amos E. And this guy was in favor of eliminating the age of consent. Like, he believed that like 30-year-olds should be able to fuck babies. That's how extreme this guy was. So this guy is going through there's like the skeptosphere of like debaters. And the fascinating thing was watching him is that he won like every debate against these people. And when I listened to the people talk, it's because they didn't understand like why an age of consent exists or what does it mean for somebody to consent to something. Like nobody actually has like a clear understanding in their head of like why is some consent okay and why is some consent bad. So like the key phrase that a lot of people don't understand was like informed consent, right? Like technically, like can an underage person like say like, yeah, I'll have sex or I'll, take a loan or I'll do whatever. They can, but they don't really understand the consequences. And the person on the other end of that transaction absolutely does. So that's why we say like these relationships are immoral or unethical or are abusive or whatever. When it comes to the Keemstar thing, people will say like, oh, like famous people can't have sex with fans because that's exploitative. But the answer is that it's not that it's exploitative, it's that it can be, right? Like it is possible. So for instance, say you were 100% right on the money. If Keemstar had DMs leaked and he was telling this girl like, hey, like you want to mess around? She's like, not much. And he's like, come on, like if we mess around, like you can get a spot on my show, like I can do this shit for you, like and she's like an up and coming YouTuber. That actually feels pretty shit. Now we're getting into some territory where we're like, Keemstar.
Yeah, it's unethical.
But just being 40 and 20, just having, like why can a 20, like it's funny because people say like the brain, oh fuck, there's so much dumb shit. All this is so dumb. People say like the brain doesn't fully develop till you're 25. Okay, all right, so how would you feel about like a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old fucking, right? Well, if you're okay with a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old, why not a 45-year-old and a 22-year-old, right? The 26-year-old's brain is fully developed. 45, there's so much dumb shit. I hate all these conversations. Yeah, they're really dumb.
No, but it bothers me especially because I'm so used to seeing like teenagers getting charged as adults, for crimes they committed, which is bananas if you think about it, because they're saying for this monumental decision, right, where you may have taken somebody's life, we're going to put you in prison 25 to life. But if you so we're saying you're culpable, you're responsible enough as a teenager to understand that you probably shouldn't have stabbed this person or you shouldn't have punched him to death, whatever. Okay, right, this monumental decision. But then if you say, oh, I want to fuck this person, you're not responsible enough to assume that responsibility for that decision. I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand how these two things exist. And I think it just, again, speaks to our relationship with sex and how awkward it is.
Yeah, I agree 1,000,000%. There's a Dave Chappelle joke about that. I think. No, it was either Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock. It was about Elizabeth Smart getting kidnapped. And it was something like,
that's Dave Chappelle. How old is 15 really?
Yeah, how old is 15 really? Yeah. And it was like, because like, oh my God, she's just a kid. But then, 16 or 15 or 14-year-old black kid, I think, was doing wrestling moves with a friend, paralyzes him, and like, we're going to charge this guy as an adult. It was like, what does that even mean? Why would you charge someone as an adult? If you can charge somebody as an adult, why the fuck would you even ever have minor like charging like provisions? Because the whole point is that they're not a fucking adult, Like, so stupid, yeah.
But to me, the way I kind of look at the age of consent is it's just a stopgap. Okay, there's no logical reasons for why they chose 18 versus 17 or 17 versus 16. They just chose an their age and they said, listen, beyond this age, we're not going to let anything happen because we think that it may have negative repercussions. Not always, but it could. So we're not. And that's how I kind of justify and I kind of keep it simple. And I think if you go, 14 and below, I think that's just puberty. I think that's kind of logical. They not hit puberty yet. I think it's kind of acceptable. But anyways, I'm fine with age consent in that regards.
Sure.
But then you get this whole talk of babying adults, and it's just like, okay, well, if you're saying these people are not responsible enough to fuck, then why would we give them any responsibilities? Why would we allow them to vote? Why would we allow them to choose the next president of whatever country? Or why would we allow them to drive on our highways or anything? If you're saying these people don't have the prefrontal cortex to make any decisions, then why don't we just make adulthood start at 25 then, if you want to be that stupid about it? But it never comes up. So I don't know. When I see these conversations happening online, much like yourself, I just cringe and I kind of get away from all of it because I can't take it seriously.
And it's hard because, like, anytime you insert any type of that rhetoric in, people will just immediately hammer you with the victim blamer thing. Like, over the last, 2 weeks ago when I covered a drama, my basic thing was that, something that irritates me a lot is people will talk about how women can't say no to men because they're scared, but these will be exclusively online conversations. Now, when you have a guy that's right in front of you, and if you might be in a bedroom or in a private area, saying no in that circumstance can reasonably be pretty scary, depending on what the situation, especially if drugs are involved in shit, if you're drunk or whatever. And I understand that and I can empathize with that. That does not apply to fucking Discord conversations, okay? If you can't say no to somebody or tell somebody that you're uncomfortable in a Discord conversation, life gets way harder than that. You need to get a guardian or a ward or whatever, somebody to take care of you, because I don't know why you should be allowed to sign a loan, to get a car, to do anything in life if you can't just tell somebody on a Discord call, hey, I'm uncomfortable, assuming that this isn't somebody that, is your boss or is doing some weird shit or whatever. If it's just 2 people on Discord, yeah.
I mean, even then I can empathize with folks because I understand there's so much pressure to please folks, or women sometimes are kind of conditioned to be so non-confrontational that even the idea of saying no to somebody who they've built a friendship or have links with might be difficult. I can understand that portion, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still your responsibility and your agency. The idea that men are supposed to assume your mental state at all times and understand exactly what you're feeling, even though you're not relaying it, can turn into arrogance really fast.
Yeah.
Right. Because now I'm just going to start thinking for you. And let's also be honest, these kinds of things are not taught to us from a young age. We don't understand always what it took me till I was 26 to really understand a lot of ladies' struggles. Right. Because here I am dating. They're not really telling me these things, but they're going through it in their heads. And I'm like, I don't find out about it till much later. I think so long as hookup cultures exist, I think there's going to be a lot of sex that's going to be regretted. And there's going to be a lot of people having sexual relationships where they're going to feel terrible about it afterwards because they haven't fostered with other people a relationship where they feel comfortable enough to relay exactly what they're thinking. Sure. Right? Because if you're just meeting somebody and you guys have only spoken 2-3 times and you fuck, there's no way you're comfortable telling them about trauma you've had in the past, why you don't feel comfortable voicing your agency. And people already suck at talking about sex off the top. So they don't have time on their side. They don't have the sexual education on their side, and they certainly don't have the self-esteem on their side. So how do you expect to have great consensual, everybody feels great afterwards sex when none of these things are present?
Yeah. Yeah, true. And you're demanding you're demanding of the average guy. You have to basically be a parent in these conversations, because not only are you trying to get somebody to do something, you don't know if they do or don't want to, but then you also have to treat them like they aren't able to actually think for themselves while you're trying to think for yourself and figure out what they're thinking. And it's holy fucking shit.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a tall order for the average guy who is fucking brainless, or the average person is pretty clueless about shit, to try to get them to assume that role in a conversation. Damn, that's a lot when you have no formal training or no informal training to do so,
Yeah, and also you're managing your own insecurities. When I'm about to have sex with a girl, especially in my younger years, it's you start to think about, all right, what do I do here? Am I doing this thing right? Or you're so caught up in the impulsivity of being horny that a lot of your brain functions are just completely turned off. Listen, being an 18-year-old out there fucking, I can tell you, I didn't remember anything. Sure. Everything was sober, but there was not a huge amount of thought behind a lot of the things. My heart was racing. I didn't know if I was kissing well. I didn't know if I was doing things properly. So to even think about the deep insecurities that someone else might have never even crossed my mind. It never even came there. So yeah, I don't know. My brain on dead like definitely would turn off. And that's why I think they have the whole idea of like post cum syndrome, because all of a sudden, right after you bust, you find some like mental clarity for a few seconds. And in the heat, like I think when it comes to hookups, I don't. When I hear people talk about it, I'm convinced that they haven't done many of them, because mine were all sober, and they still involved a lot of miscommunication. Add in alcohol, and I don't know how you get any talking done. Am I crazy?
No, I agree. I actually approach things completely from the opposite end, just because I recognize this so much. If I like am planning on hooking up with somebody, we've already like fucking thoroughly talked about everything prior to that. Because trying to figure out anything in the heat of the moment is just fucking impossible. Yes. And I consider myself to be like pretty pretty in tune and empathetic with what because it's a big part of like what I do. Is one of my I enjoy it a lot, and even at that. Like, I still have to, like, verbally check in and stuff. If it's with somebody and it's like this happened on the spur of the moment and we haven't had a lot of discussion beforehand, just because people get so nervous and weird. And when you're having sex, like, pain sounds and pleasure sounds can sound the exact fucking same, right? Like, there'll be a girl that I'm like, I'm like finger blasting a girl and she's like, and I'm like, are you okay? And, sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, keep going with yourself. And other times it's like, this is actually really uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, I can't fucking tell by just what the fuck, we have to verbally, like, even check in. And, yeah, it's...
Or sometimes it doesn't feel good, but they say it does because they're conditioned to think that pain is acceptable. So you don't find out till the next day, like, yeah, that was actually super painful when you were doing that. So, there's all those layers to that. I want to ask you, because when you have these conversations with women, and you unpack sex and your thoughts about it with them, are they ever taken aback with how upfront you are about sex?
I've had a lot of people say that this is a concern that they have, but I have never, ever, 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 ever in my life ran into that issue with a girl. And overwhelmingly, it is usually the opposite thing, where most people seem to be really appreciative that I'm like very upfront, because when you have like all of that baggage set aside beforehand, then when it actually comes time to fuck or mess around, you know exactly like what's on the table. So like if you talk to a girl and she's like like, I really like this, I really don't like that, I'm super into this, I really don't do this, you really need to wear a condom, or I don't care about a condom. Like once you figure that out, then when it's time to fuck, as long as you remember what she's told you, like the everything like flows like so
seamless.
Much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I'm not questioning whether or not they actually like it. My question is it common for them?
I mean, I don't think it's very common. No, most of the people that I talk to seem like it's not very common at all. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they don't commonly have those conversations, or for you, it's kind of a rarity, but they appreciate it.
That generally seems to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's, I think for men, the fear that they probably have when it comes to having that conversation beforehand is they're worried that if you bring up sex, the girl's going to get turned off because she thinks you only want sex, which is probably what it is. You only want, but you never want to give up the hand before you're there. So I believe that's generally what they're uncomfortable with. They won't even bring up sex as they're bringing the girl back to their place. So like, you want to come over for a movie, right? So a lot of it's just euphemisms or just, just innuendo in regards to what's about to happen. But rarely is it explicitly said, because I think, and this, truth be told, is true for some people, where once you mention sex, a light bulb goes off in their head and they think that's the only thing you want, which, if we're being honest, a lot of dudes only want that. But do you also think that you pull from a certain type of women, and as a result, those conversations are far more likely to be comfortable?
I mean, as a streamer,
yeah,
I mean, like as a streamer, obviously, people that are messaging me, like I'm in an open relationship, so they know that they're not like trying to exclusively date me, and I talk really openly about sex and shit all the time anyway. So if you're DMing me, you probably already know, like roughly, like okay, well, there's a sexual, for sure. But I will say that my experiences with people on Tinder very closely mirror my experiences with like people that I pull like as a fucking streamer, to where like even in those circumstances, like I am pretty upfront and I am pretty honest with what I do, and I think that generally people are like even in those situations will be fairly receptive. One thing that I think a lot of guys don't realize is they approach a lot of these sexual situations, like what you said before, where it feels like what they're trying to do is navigate as much as possible and avoid ever directly asking because they're really scared that they'll get a no. When I'm on Tinder and I'm just like horny and I want somebody to fuck, I'll be pretty forward about it. And if the girl says no, it was never gonna work well anyway. Fuck it. Like, because if you're looking for girls where you have to navigate those conversations, you're gonna end up having to play a whole bunch of dumb games, and like it's gonna end up being like really weird. Like, I think there are girls that want to fuck. You just have to be like a little bit more straightforward about it, and then you can find them, I think.
Can I ask you,
Yeah,
if you never were direct or super direct about the fact that you just wanted to fuck, do you think you would have had way more options?
In terms of like Tinder like dates, yeah, for sure. Like there are a lot of girls where we're like, when I breach the conversation of sex, and I'll do it pretty quick if I'm on Tinder because I'm not gonna have like 17 fucking days of talk with you and then say I just want to fuck. There are some girls when I do it, they're like, that's not really what I'm interested in or whatever, and I'll be like, okay, cool, like good luck finding what you want, and then I'll just like unmatch them and then I just like move on. Yeah.
So I agree with you in regards to doing that because why waste your time? The problem is most dudes in their day-to-day life don't have as much access to sex as you and I may have, right? And so the idea of weeding out women that they actually want and desire by mentioning sex is a deterrent for them because they're like, bro, I don't get any, so I'm not going to fuck the bag up for myself at all. And I think that deters a lot of people from ever mentioning what they actually want because they feel like it's just self-sabotage.
It's possible, but then if you're a guy and you're doing that, then you're kind of like reinforcing like the all the toxic like stereotypes around like dating where it's like, okay, I'm a guy, I've got the bait, now I can't reel it in too quick because if I do, it'll fight, right? You're kind of like, because at that point, I would feel like the guy is basically playing games. Because at that point, by the time you fuck the girl, you're probably going to peace out anyway, because if that's your only goal. And then girls are going to be like, okay, well, guys are literally just trying to like lie to you until they can fuck you and blah, blah, blah. And that's like kind of, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I don't expect guys to work against their self-interest when it comes to sex and dating, especially when they're not getting any, because you know the sex sex is certainly not evenly distributed amongst men. So I wouldn't expect it. I agree with the notion, and I think that's how things should play out. But I think people who are concerned with their own sexual pleasure are not going to think that way. They're not going to do things that is going to fuck them over.
Yeah, I think that the big problem is that like it's harder and harder for us to meet people. So every girl that you interact with seems like it might be the last girl you ever see.
Yes.
And that's probably a big problem with a lot of guys. Yeah, because like really you have like school is a big pool of people that you can potentially fuck. Not if you're in like STEM or whatever, because then there's like one girl for like every 20 guys. And then work is often a place where you can pick from people to basically fuck. Unless you got a STEM job, in which case it's one girl for every 20 guys, and then you're also fucked. Aside from that, though, you have online dating, and those are like ferociously competitive markets, which is really, really hard to deal in. I'm going to be totally honest, because I live my life online. I don't know where you would go in real life to meet people anymore, unless you like go to church or something. Like that seems like a really difficult thing.
And guys are not the most photogenic people.
Yeah,
they often can't dress themselves or take decent photos, so it compounds the problem of meeting people. And then you know the whole taboo surrounding sex and how uncomfortable it is to talk. Like you're very capable about talking sex comfortably, one, because you have experience, but two, because if you don't get somebody because you mentioned sex, it's not going to really affect you that negatively. For dudes, especially nowadays, with everyone being online more than ever, it becomes even more difficult to have any of those opportunities. I think, you know, that's part of the reason why virginity is skyrocketing, is like a lot of the traditional ways in which people would meet in person or through friends of friends is definitely waning in favor of online dating, which I believe favors those who are more physically pleasing. And so as a result, ugly dudes are definitely going to be on the lower end when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I really do. It's kind of weird because in like the 2000s, there was like the metrosexual culture picked up quite a bit, and then it like died in like 6 or 7 years. I think there are a surprising number of young men that are like 4 out of 10s that if they just like kind of like groomed and like shaved and like got a haircut and like wore like just clothes that fit, they would be like 7 out of 10s. Like unironically, they would massively improve the way that they look.
Yes.
Yes. But and that's before we even talk about like going to the gym or doing anything else. Like just like cleaning up a little bit would help so much. And yeah. Also, I think that there needs to be some level of self-esteem, which is obviously really hard, and I don't know how you start building that like in your 20s. For whatever reason, all throughout my life, I've always had pretty high self-esteem, so I didn't mind when I was like 17, 18, 19. Like, I would ask some girls out, and I'd get turned down. I would get shot down, and it happens. But it's like, okay, whatever, it happens. It's not the end of the world. But I noticed that guys that are really scared of making that direct ask and getting shot down, they will mind fuck themselves on one girl that they're too scared to actually make a move on for years. And they will lose out on so many potential things around them just because they're like, if I friend her hard enough, maybe eventually her mind will change. But they never actually have the courage to make the direct ask. And I will say, I really truly do believe this. Maybe this is just my bias, but I really do believe this. Getting turned down by somebody is never, ever, ever as bad as your fear of it will be. I think that, like, because there were even like, oh man, dude, there was this one girl in college I had a huge crush on. But I made a direct ask, like after like 2 or 3 months of like chilling with her and talking to her and shit. And she said that she wasn't interested, she was talking to another guy. But after I asked that question, I actually felt a lot of relief. I was like, okay, she shot me down. It sucks. But like, this was like a 3-month friendship. I didn't spend like 2 years obsessing over this person. And now I can like, like take my blinders off and look at other girls, I think people are really, really scared of that rejection. I don't think it's really as bad as people envision it being in their minds,
Rejection. I think that kind of anxiety is justified in some situations, because I think the more you build it up in your head, the worse the rejection you feel like it's going to be sometimes. And sometimes it can be terrible. It really can be terrible. I think people's self-esteem just does not do well. I find some people can cope with things better than others.
That is true.
I see this all the time in stand-up. Like you see some comics go up and they go up with the worst joke possible, and they come up and they're just smiling because like, all right, man, one of the people laughed. And then you have the next guy who's a super talented comedian. He's like, one person doesn't laugh at one portion of their bit, and they lose their minds. You can tell that their ability to cope with things is not nearly as good because their mindset's all in a weird spot. I know, man, I've been at clubs before and seen guys go up to a girl and get rejected loudly, and you just see their self-esteem just get destroyed. So I don't know if I could go so far as to say that rejection is going to be not as bad as people expect, because for some people, for whatever reason, it really does fuck up their whole week. And they also marinate, because I believe you're probably able to get rejected and then move on with your day and start to think about the next thing. For some people, once they get rejected, they sit on that, and they're not able to move on.
Sure. I will say that there might be people where rejection always sucks, but I will say, as a rule, the longer you fixate on somebody, the worse it's going to be. If you obsess over a girl for 2 years and you don't make a move, and finally you do it, when that rejection comes, that's going to hurt a lot, because now you're probably close friends. She's probably a regular fixture in her life. You're not going to be able to like just see her as a friend. You're going to see her as like, this person thinks I'm not good enough for them, which means I'm not good enough for me, which means I'm not good enough for anybody. That's the mindfuck you, that's why I always say, like, this is again why I am so, for all of my life, really, I've been pretty forward with everything.
Wait, are you saying that men should be looking at different women at the same time?
Hell yeah, of course. Fucking A. Yeah, what the fuck? If you're not dating yet, then yeah, hell yeah. If somebody has a problem with that, then you fucking lock it down. You fucking move in, say you want to date or whatever.
But here's the next layer of it. Ladies get upset when they find out you talking to other people, but like, bitch, I'm doing it for my self-esteem.
Sure.
In order for me to feel comfortable and give you the best me, I gotta be talking to different ladies.
Dude, a woman has at any given time 10 to at least 10 men in their life that would fuck them immediately. So fuck off with that shit, right? The funniest
but you know exactly what I'm talking about. How many times has a girl said, "Are you talking to anyone else?"
Yeah, I know what you mean. Again, I'm really forward with everything. Like, I tell everybody, like, I'm straight up. But that's why, like, if I meet a girl and I like her, like, I'm gonna make a move in like a month or two. I'm never, because like I have like 2 big experiences in my life. There was a girl that I was obsessed with. Now, I was still a fucking kid, but it was like my freshman, sophomore year of high school. There was a girl I was obsessed with for years, and we're talking like the depressing, like pathetic obsession. We're talking to like fall asleep on the phone. Like that kind of shit, because we didn't have text messaging or stuff. Oh yeah, real bad. And I finally tried to ask this girl out, like just coming into like, it was between like sophomore junior, the summer vacation or whatever. And like she gave me a kiss on the lips, my very first kiss ever. It was on June 2nd. I remember the date. It's etched into my mind. and she turned me down, and I was destroyed. I was like, oh my God, what happened? Blah, 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 blah. And that rejection hurt way more than like, then there are other girls where, like I said, like there was a girl in college. This girl was so awesome. She was in my saxophone studio. Like I made her laugh. We got along really well. And I asked her out, and I found out that she was like already like basically almost dating like an upperclassman. But I moved on that in like 2 months. I was like, yo, like you're really cool. Like, do you want to go like get a drink sometime? She's like, I'm kind of. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I was able to move on from that really fast because it's like I saw it, I shot my shot. I didn't have this huge time and emotional investment. Now I'll amend my earlier statement. It's not that all the rejection will never hurt, but it will hurt so much worse if you mindfuck yourself and drag it out for months or years. And everybody knows that friend that is trying to like convince another friend for years and years and years to date them, and it doesn't work. And it's like, oh man, dude, you mindfuck yourself so hard, you know?
Yeah, no. Everyone I know has got a story from high school or some point where they got rejected and they remember that rejection for the rest of their lives. So that's definitely a true statement. But I agree. I think the more you try to invest yourself into it and the more you overthink it, the worse the result's going to be if you get a negative outcome. Let me see here. Okay, I want to bring up something just relations to what we're talking about. We talk about pressures and dating. We often talk about manipulation. I don't know if you had this. Have you ever not wanted to have sex with somebody and they started like just kissing on your neck or like straddling over you? And then you said yes, which a lot of people could just see as seduction. But I was wondering, what is the difference? Isn't seduction just a form of manipulation? Maybe like more with a more positive connotation.
So when I think of manipulation is trying to get somebody to do something while hiding that fact. If somebody is like blatantly like humping you and coming on to you, I wouldn't consider that manipulation. If somebody's like, can you come back to my hotel room? I need help with homework. And they're trying to fuck you, I think that's like manipulation, yeah. The worst experience of my life when I was new to the Tinder game. Oh man, dude. I didn't know anything. I didn't know about this angle of photographs, okay? The girl angle of like doing this. I didn't know what that meant.
MySpace angles is what they're called.
Oh yeah, dude. And there were
there's a literal term for that. There's a little term for that. Women who like take manipulative photos to hide their weight or whatever.
Oh yeah, man. And there have been 2 girls where I hooked up with them, and I remember walking into the fucking hotel lobby, and I see this girl sitting there, and I'm like, oh no, what did I fucking do? And I'll see the face, and I'm like,
you still gave him that charity dick?
But I have to, because I feel so bad at that point. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell her to like, dude, you're like 150 pounds heavier than I thought you'd be. Yeah, it's like, you know what, man? I fucked up. I committed myself to it. She played me well. Fuck it. Let's go to room 203 and we'll fucking dick her down and get the fuck out. Yeah. Oh,
right,
man.
We call that charity dick.
Yeah,
that's when you do one for a good cause.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, they played the game well. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Fuck it. You got fucked. But I mean, yeah, it happens sometimes. Or like sometimes, like you're not 100% feeling it, but like, so like, this is gonna sound really toxic because sometimes people make it sound really toxic. But there are times where like you're not 100% feeling it. It might be like the first time, but like you know the other person really wants it, and like. It's not like a very traumatizing experience for me to have sex with somebody that like, I don't really want to. And if I feel like they're going to get a lot of the experience, like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. I can fuck this person. We can mess around. It's fine. You know, I don't really want to, but you know, fuck it. It's okay. They have a good time. I leave. It's whatever. It's not like a fucking traumatizing experience is going to leave me like, you know, PTSD afterwards. So I think it's okay to do it in those cases. Like, fuck it.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that notion. I think the line between what you described as manipulation and what we're talking about in regards to seduction or charity dick or whatever the concept is, I think the line between those things is not defined for people. And sometimes we speak to the insistence or persistence or just the repeated attempts to get the result that people want in sex. And we're not honest about the fact that it happens in various ways all the time. And so that's why when I hear this conversation about enthusiastic consent, I kind of cringe because I'll be honest with you. I have fucked women I did not want to fuck whatsoever, and they knew it, and I just did it because they needed to get their rocks off. And it's happened to me numerous times, and I'm not traumatized by it, like you said. I just think it's kind of part of the game. This idea that you're always going to be enthusiastically having sex sounds great in a Twitter world, but I just don't think it's the reality that people live.
Yeah. The only problem is I think like balancing that out is you have to be really, really, really careful because like let's say that like so like this might be okay. So like. Sometimes in prior households, like my significant other is like, hey, I need you to go out and do the whole fucking yard today, okay? I don't want it done this weekend. I want it done now. And it's like, you know what? If you really want it, blow me, okay? And I'll fucking do it. And you know, like, that is like a scenario where it's like, it's not enthusiastic consent, but they're okay. They can do it. I'll get off. It's like, okay, I'll go to the yard. Fuck you, whatever. We're fine. However, that type of like lack of enthusiastic consent, like especially in a relationship, I think is okay. But what I don't want is, I don't want to be with like a new girl in a hotel room who's like really fucking nervous. And if I start kind of like, you know, leaning into it and she doesn't really want to, but she's scared that if she says no, I'm going to fucking hate her, or I'm going to like kick her out of the room and she's not going to have a place to sleep. That kind of lack of enthusiastic consent, I think, is really, really bad. And I would never want that one to happen. So like with a lot of these situations, yeah, it depends on like, why is the enthusiastic consent not there? And like, what is the reason why the other person, like if they're just like not 100% in the mood, then, you know, it's depending on the relationship, it's whatever. But if they're like afraid of saying no, I think that's really, really bad.
Yeah. I agree. I think on that notion, I would say I agree. Um, I hope these conversations get had more often. I hope people talk about the awkwardness and the realities of what hookup cultures are actually like. I think sometimes we talk about it and we don't speak about all the little things that happen that we're not very privy to prior to doing it, or that we haven't taken time to unpack. I think if we do that, people have a higher likelihood of actually having these conversations beforehand. But again, I think so long as men feel like they're not going to get sex if they talk about it, and so long as that stigma is out there, I don't think they're ever going to talk about it. I just don't even see guys. I don't see guys doing anything that's going to fuck up their odds of getting laid. So
Maybe
we need to. I think we need to do a better job of that.